This is Luke Kigel from Kimberly-Clark. You're listening to the CPGGUYS podcast.
Welcome to another episode of the CPGGUYS podcast. Our hosts, Sri Rajgopalan, Peter V.S. Bond, and Brian Gildenberg explore how brands and retailers engage consumers in an increasingly digitally driven world. And now, here are the CPGGUYS. Hello and welcome to the CPGGUYS podcast. I'm PVSB. When I'm not co-hosting this podcast along with my partners, I help enterprise brands improve their SEO and SEM, growing their e-commerce business in my work at Flywheel. Unfortunately, not joining me today for today's conversation is my fellow co-founder of this growing community. He's the Lord of La La Land, as I like to call him, currently basking in the glory of his victorious Yankees as they stand atop the American League East. He's the former chief customer officer at General Mills and the patriarch of a family media empire that includes his performing artist daughters Ria and Lara Raj and his podcasting wife Kavita Raj. His three cats have their own Instagram account as well. He's the man known as Shri. He is, as we record this, on his way to Cannes, where we are attending the Cannes Lions Festival of Creativity. So it should be a good time over there. Before we get to our guest, I want to ask you all in the audience to help spread the word about this community we've created in the CPGGUYS. Beyond sharing our podcast with your friends and colleagues, if you're using Apple or Spotify as your preferred listening platform, please leave us a rating. We like the number 5. It's our favorite. It's entirely up to you, but we ask you to do that because it helps feed the algorithm that makes our podcast more findable by CPG and retail people, much like yourself, who are looking to be educated and entertained at the same time. We're also happy that the CPGGUYS is part of an impressive collection of highly rated podcasts, including CPG Scoop with Reese and Jennifer, and the FMCG Guys with Daniel Efrain and Christine. Links to our podcast, our sister casts, and the social media profiles of Shri's daughters, Ria and Lara, they can be found in the digital liner notes of this episode. You don't have to write anything down. Just toggle over. They're all there. Lots of hyperlinks. So let's get our conversation going today. As retail media continues to develop and the number of retailers with a network mushrooms, here on the CPGGUYS, we keep the conversation going so we can collectively, as brands and retailers, deliver the best outcomes for our consumers. So how do we do that? Well, we talk to retail media leaders from across the country, regionals, super regionals, mass, clubs, dollar, grocery, national. We have them all on our show. What we do is, when we do feature such a leader, we get into metrics, success parameters, what constitutes really good campaigns, and what the future holds. Keeping on that spirit, we have today a first-time guest, Luke Kigel. He's the Vice President, Digital Marketing and Consumer Experience at Kimberly-Clark. Luke is responsible for driving marketing, productivity, and performance, as well as accelerating digital transformation for Kimberly-Clark North America's portfolio of brands. Luke leads an organization comprised of experts across marketing disciplines, including integrated media, design, social influencer, PR, CRM, and digital experience, consumer promotions, packaging, marketing operations, and much more. Man, it's all packed in there. Functional expertise brought to bear across the entire business. I think he probably also sweeps the floors and empties the wastebasket.
Of course.
Luke joined Kimberly-Clark from Walgreens, where he led media and omnichannel planning and retail media business, Walgreens Advertising Group. He previously spent 6 years at J&J, better known now in its consumer entity as Kenvue, where he led global and North American media and connections. And prior to J&J, he started his career at agencies including Mediacom, OMD, and Universal Mcann. Luke is a native New Yorker. I know what that means. I smell Yankees all over it. And he's also a graduate of NYU. Luke, welcome to the podcast. How you doing, bro?
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. And Shri is a massive slacker for not being here, obviously, but I appreciate the pending rosé rates over talking to yourself and myself. But it's good to see you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And for the record, loud and proud Met fan, albeit very sad for all the obvious reasons.
I went to the Mets Dodgers doubleheader a couple of weeks ago out at Citi Field.
Nice.
It was a lovely day for me. I think the Dodgers won both ends of that doubleheader.
Yeah, no, that sounds about right.
Now are the Mets?
We haven't had much to be happy about.
They're already mathematically eliminated from the playoffs, right? So we're good with that. Okay, just wanted to make
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, Luke, before we get to the questions I've prepared for you, can you give us a brief overview of, I know I kind of touched on a bunch of things, but why don't you give us an overview of your role and remit as at Kimberly-Clark? I think that would be very helpful for our audience.
The shorthand is there is not a chief marketing officer role in Kimberly-Clark. So globally, there is a global chief growth officer. And then inside of KC in North America, there's sort of multiple different layers of it. And so my role sort of functionally, I know you listed some of the areas, my role functionally, has call it, 2/3 ish of what a CMO role might have. But it is not sort of a traditional chief marketing officer role. We exist to bring marketing transformation to life. So in our industry, you hear people talk about things like modern marketing capabilities and modern marketing models and engines and different ways of going to market in new and unique ways. Some of it being certainly relevant to the topics discussed on this program, that connection between quote unquote brand or national and quote unquote retail marketing as a core part of that. But I often say a bit cheekily, but we're not a COE. We have some COE-esque characteristics, but we are not a COE. And I feel quite strongly about that distinction because a COE is about understanding. You've got expertise and you've got frameworks and playbooks, and you give those to the business leaders to go and implement and execute. And I believe wholeheartedly that the path to driving transformation is to lead by doing. And you do that with ruthless collaboration, with know-how, with an ability to influence, and then to bring depth of expertise in the areas that you need to transform it. And that's why we exist, and that's what we're doing.
Thanks, Luke. I'm going to include in the digital liner notes of this episode links to your LinkedIn profile, Kimberly-Clark's LinkedIn page, and Kimberly-Clark's corporate website, where our audience can go and learn a little bit more about you, maybe multitask as they listen to the melodious tunes of our voices, soothing them with education. And
what wouldn't be more interesting?
Exactly. All right. So let me get to the questions. So Luke, your career passed through quite a number of elite brands, J&J, now better known as Kenvue, Mediacom, Universal Mcann, OMD, Walgreens. And included some particularly at Walgreens retail media leadership role. Take us through to the role you're in at Kimberly-Clark. Would love to hear some of the more pivotal moments that you think helped shape your trajectory, and any advice you might give to someone who wants to follow a maybe not the exact same route, but pursuing something what you've done.
Some of it is one of my old bosses used to talk about how he just chases experiences, and I say openly that I've never in my career sat with I want to get to that post or I want to get to that level. Like I just do stuff, and in doing stuff, opportunities have presented themselves, and I've been quite fortunate, and I've had great leaders and great mentors, and of course, had some success in driving some fairly transformational work across the experiences that I've had, or being part of some pretty transformational bodies of work with great teams. But that's in part of what it is. And so, I was agency side, and then was excited to get a different view of the industry and a different view of the business. And so switched seats and went quote unquote client side, and then was on the manufacturing end and wanted a different view of the business. And so, hence the retail side. And now sort of I'm, back in sort of CPG land, but having different lenses and different views of the industry is incredibly exciting to me and valuable to me. And it's all I've been in business, I've been in the center, I've been in global, I've been in regional, I've been in local, I've sat in so many different seats that I get a lot of energy from seeing, I'll say see the world, but what I mean is seeing like the world of our industry from different lenses. And, we've had pivotal points, maybe it wasn't like early days of digital, but I would say when I was still agency side working on Johnson & Johnson, and it was still at a time when agencies were organized with separate digital practices. And we made a decision, and it was a formidable experience for me, because it was a decision where I went from having a direct reporting team of about 40 people. And then we said, we're strategically going to merge these teams together. And it was sort of an 18-month plan. And you knew, not everyone was going to opt in. You knew you'd have some attrition. You knew it was going to be painful. But 18 months later, you'd be all the better for it. And I basically went from having 35 to 40 direct reports to, I think, 3 to 5, but a sphere of influence of more like 150. And obviously that, learning how to influence without direct reporting accountability was also quite valuable. So I would say that experience was quite formative. And then going to J&J would be the other. And I could go on and on, but the creation of Walgreens Advertising Group inside of Walgreens, which the company has changed strategies since I joined, but as I was coming in, a very clear purpose on opportunity in the retail media space that they were absent from at that time. So I take it as one of the great honors that I've had in my career, was pitching for the seed funding for, and then launching and leading that business for the first couple of years that it was in existence. And obviously they're well on their way with Abby leading. They're on their way to their next chapter. And obviously I look from afar and root the team on as well. But they've all been great experiences. What I would say, if you have any advice to give, as careers progress, the sort of what is the impact on the scoreboard dynamic changes. And as leaders that are very, very impact and output oriented, as we all are, sometimes the magnitude of that impact, as sort of the scope and the sphere gets bigger, it takes longer to see those things show up on the scoreboard. And there are times in our business where decisions you make today might not actually show up meaningfully for a year. And so you have to find a path while you are trying to drive massive change, massive transformation, massive impact to the business. As my current leader and mentor has counseled me, find the path to appreciating, forgive the sports analogy, but find a path to appreciating the first downs more along the way, because it can be quite hard emotionally to just only focus on getting to that point of magnitude of impact that might take time.
Luke, I was with Carrie Sander, the Chief Customer Officer at Kellanova this week, and she reminded me that this whole issue of understanding that things take time. So I'm constantly reminded by my Chief Financial Officer that I am responsible for delivering both the quarter and the decade. And so that balance between the two can be challenging, but you have to keep that in mind, because you have the short-term objectives you need to hit against, but you also have to have that longer. You have to let the timeline play out, because if all you're doing is trying to drive a quarter, you're never going to get the decade, because you're going to miss the investments. So thinking about how you are shaping the role you're in now, I think back to your agency work. Was there particular stuff at your agency, maybe at that those experiences are really shaping how you're thinking about what you're doing now at Kimberly-Clark?
My honest answer is the things that are transferable are mostly experiences of leadership and of paths of influencing and collaborating. And I mean, a lot of what agencies do is transformational in nature, and I genuinely believe that jobs jobs like roles like mine exist for a reason, and the industry is in this flux of transformation that in some ways feels evergreen. And I just think these types of roles in our industry are increasingly, 80% of the job is transformation and change management, and 15-20% is doing the stuff. And I think that's just sort of the dynamic that we're going to be living in. And while it's equal parts, I would say it's equal parts super exciting, because you're constantly getting to shape and to create. And if you're comfortable in sort of nebulousness, to then be able to shape and create, then that gives you energy, and that excites you as it does for myself. But it's also super hard. Like it's incredibly, incredibly difficult for some of the reasons we touched on, but also in general. So I would say the things that are transferable are more approaches to leadership and looking, call it 18 months to 2 years out, for things you're going to do now that is going to be painful. But when you get to the other side, the magnitude of impact will be that much greater. And the other thing maybe I'll say is my last agency job was at J3, which was the J&J bespoke arm of Universal Mcann. And we were part of a big company, but we were small enough that we could do a lot of things. And I feel similarly, like Kimberly-Clark is a big company, but there's an entrepreneurial spirit in the DNA of this company that still really, really exists. And I'm so fortunate to be, it's only been a year, but I'm so fortunate to be there. We've got a special set of leaders and honestly, I think a special culture that still has that entrepreneurial thing, even though it's 100 plus years old, in its DNA, where you get the right people and you can accomplish just about anything. And we can just do stuff. We can do stuff. And that gives me a ton of excitement.
So Luke, let's talk about marketing investment from a full funnel perspective. I want to know how you approach it. Is there even a funnel anymore? Is it really just about, I'd love to hear your perspective on that, but like, where's the focus? Because we're now in an era where we have these really powerful closed loop performance marketing mechanisms known as retail media networks. I know Kimberly-Clark has access to quite a good deal of first party consumption data through other mechanisms that they've invested in. So, where are you focusing most of your attention, and how do you think about measuring performance across, what does a campaign strategy look like so that you can market to the maximum in this incredibly powerful network of performance marketing tools?
For starters, it sounds like, well, no duh, in our industry, but everything starts and stops with the consumer. And why it's important in this context is we have an entire industry that talks about media and then talks about retail media. And again, I feel privileged to have sat on different sides of the equation, but it all comes back to the same thing, which is the consumer, the people that we are trying to influence with our messaging of our brands. Those people do not distinguish between a shopper experience or a brand experience or a retail media exposure or a national. They don't. And so we shouldn't either. And so there's a dynamic in our industry. And this is not a comment about my current role. I was asked in my previous job, to speak at quite a few of our clients at the time. Now it'd be our peer companies. And I would say the same thing. It's you have boardrooms all over the industry where people talk about, we're going to be more consumer centric and the consumer's at the center. And you've got a slide with a picture of a woman shopping in the middle. And then around it is all the bubbles of all of the things that you're going to do to have a 360 experience of a marketing plan to reach them. And then what happens? You leave that room and then people go and develop strategies based on job functions. And that is a dynamic that exists, I think, is still pretty prevalent in our industry. So to me, it comes down to a very simple, you need to design for the consumer, and the consumer does not distinguish, and you should not either. No, I don't think a funnel exists, albeit, again, I think the industry still has a collective understanding. And so I think there's a little bit of a push, but how far can you push without being like people really don't understand what the heck you're talking about? But the notion of you have broad awareness and then you bring them through to consideration, and while they're searching, then you kind of hit them and then you bring them through to conversion. Like the fact that you can be watching a big screen in your living room while you're flipping through your phone, you get targeted with something you see on Instagram and you're like, ooh, I like that. And you buy it. That just smushed the funnel in 30 seconds. 30 seconds. And then your experience with that brand starts when it arrives in your house. Did it come fast? Did you have a good experience? Maybe you're incentivized to write a review, and that's what builds brand equity for that brand. But it's all smush. It's all smush. And so I believe the strategies are clear. The question is how can you get it done? And that's what we are quite focused on is going deep into audiences and understanding who it is that we're trying to influence, what content we have in order to effectively communicate to them, but then execute regardless of platform. And this is easy to say, hard to do. But that to me is what the ultimate goal is.
Then if I think about it, after you've built the audience that you want to target, then it's about the campaign. So what constitutes, the ideal campaign? I've got to imagine it's different based upon obviously the audience and what you're talking about. How do you think about baking the right campaign, and how do you make sure that the organization knows that this is the way we approach this audience versus this other audience?
You said the answer in that it will look different depending on the audiences. Although, to be clear, if it wasn't obvious from what I just said, I believe wholeheartedly that the discipline that has been media planning, increasingly, so that discipline grew up as channel planning. And still, for the most part, like this is, again, it's easy to say, hard to do. Most media plan discussions go very quickly from this is our audience, and then these are the channels. And to me, the magic is if you can flip that model and it's not about channel planning, it's about audience strategy and audience planning, and that becomes the discipline. And that's what helps you merge what you do in a retailer environment versus what you do in quote unquote brand. So you just keep on anchoring back to that, understanding the reality that there's platform limitations, there's customer relationships, and all of these things matter. So it's all part of call it data points and what decisions you make in terms of where you invest your dollars and how much you put in what place. But it in a perfect world, it would come back to you've got 4 audiences, and then you should be able to reach them platform agnostic. And then once you know what platforms you're reaching them in, there's another layer of how do you show up in that platform to be relevant to the experience in that platform. And if you play all of that out, marketing looks very different. Like when people say modern marketing, what are you talking about? Like that's in part what you're talking about. And it looks very different how you would organize, how you would execute, and where you spend your time than it did 3 years ago, let alone, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago.
I want to remind our audience that I have the distinct pleasure of speaking with Luke Kigel. He is the Vice President of Digital Marketing and Consumer Experience at Kimberly-Clark, maker of great brands like Kleenex, which it was available throughout my household on many levels in many rooms. If we run out, my wife will absolutely hunt me down as being a derelict spouse and primary grocery shopper. All right. So let's talk about measurement, because at the end of the day, performance marketing is about measuring performance. What are the metrics that you're really using to measure success and advocate for? And is it about media mix marketing anymore? How does multi-touch attribution? You've got all this performance marketing in a closed loop environment, and you have all these models that you talk about. What does this combination fit into? Does MMM even mean anything anymore to you? Is it more about taking advantage of these much more powerful retail media networks with their closed loop measurement, being able to get at multi-touch attribution? I'm really curious as what your thoughts are around that.
I think this is an area where the ability to measure, I think, will always a little bit lag the consumer behavior and the way that consumers are leveraging technology in living their lives. And so that's a reality of the industry. I personally, me, Luke, N of one, I do believe marketing mix modeling does still play a role, albeit I think the way that models are used and the frequency in which you have to execute them is much different than it was, call it again, 3 to 5 years ago. So I think it does play a role. I also think back to this notion of audience centric, the only way you can do that is with an appropriate blend of what our industry calls first party, second party, and third party data, like that blend. And the retailer relationships are becoming increasingly important into that, call it first and second party space. And that dynamic, I think, will only increase and improve, and does tie back to what views do you have of measurement and what correlations can you drive. So the way I, not to oversimplify, but the way, again, this is me, Luke, N of one, thinking about it from an industry lens, it's not there is one singular truth. There are triangulations of, call it 2 to 3 things. Some of them are correlative. Some of them are leading indicators. And then ultimately, the increased frequency of a marketing mix model becomes in part validation and in part just sort of another triangulation point. And the combination of those things will give you an insight as to what is driving the performance in your business. So a long way to say, I think there's a role for all of it. I don't think there's a perfect solution. I think the industry will continue to evolve in that space. But right now, I believe that there is an effective role for retailer specific solutions as well as still marketing mix modeling.
I absolutely agree with you. I think MMM is not obsolete. I think it plays a role, but it's not about one or the other. It's about contextually what you draw from each of them to help educate and strategize. Can
I build on that for 1 second too?
Yeah, by all means.
The dynamic of, obviously retail media is a term I don't love. But again, it's a articulation of a bucket that the industry understands. But retail media was originally born out of search on site, display ads on site, and then little by little has started to expand. And the growth within, call it the major retail media platforms, the growth will increasingly come from what they can do offsite. So then you're talking about leveraging data. It's part of executions offsite. And as that dynamic continues to play out in the marketplace, Amazon having a video up front, for example, this year, as that dynamic plays out in the marketplace, it will make what we just talked about of the role of measurement, marketing mix combined with individual retailer solutions, it will make that even more important to have a coordinated ecosystem.
Luke, you spent a number of years at Walgreens building out Walgreens advertising group. Hardly a week goes by without another RMN being announced. Goose Media Network for Wawa, Gulp Media Network for 7-Eleven, Unify, Leap, they're all everywhere. And so we're getting a little crazy here. I guess my question is this: what's going on and where's this going to shape out? Because, and particularly, I understand, I want to, there's the aspect of what's valuable to the retailers, right? If you're a grocery retailer and you've been operating for 100 years on a net 2% margin, and suddenly you're presented with like a 70% gross opportunity, you're like, yeah, give me more of those dollars. But that's like the iceberg above the water. There's a whole lot of stuff going on. So I want to know from you, like, where's this all going? Because, I'll throw out one other piece of data. Digiday did an analysis of Georgia Pacific, and they were operating with about 30 or 40 different retail media networks. And after they did the analysis, they came to the conclusion that, you know what? to get the bang for the buck, you really only need to use 7 because a lot of them really aren't there yet and they don't necessarily deliver the value. And you've got, I mean, how do you manage all of this on the brand side? It's got to be a bit challenging. I'll throw it to you. I know I throw a lot at you. I'm throwing spaghetti at the wall, but I'd love your take.
I obviously do not have a crystal ball. That being said, I have an opinion. And I think where you were sort of headed with your Georgia Pacific example is right. So the long tail is getting longer. And what I believe is that it's a signal that it's not retailers. I know retailers end up being the main focus, but it's really just about who has high volumes, high scale of great direct relationships with consumers that can translate that into either data that brands are able to access and use to improve their targeting and their performance and their measurement, or the ability to deliver great experience to those consumers directly. And that's not just retail, that's any company that's a product or service that has those scaled relationships. And that's why we're seeing this influx in the industry. And your point about the business dynamics and the margin pressures, et cetera, is also spot on. So you look through that lens and pretty quickly you'd get to, well, what consumer attention exists? Not that many of these platforms have that much scale that you will get outsized benefit, certainly relative to the cost. And then you say, what's the value of the data? And that is a testable proposition, mind you, but you very easily and very quickly would get to how valuable is the data from X, Y, and Z, I'll say long tail versus the other. So what I believe, again, I don't have a crystal ball, but what I think is likely is so call it 2 paths. I think there's a potential that there's consolidation within, we'll call it within the long tail. There's consolidation, be it through consortium or otherwise, which then creates a magnitude of scale on the, call it the retail media provider side of the house. The other potential path is advertisers will, in macro, look and say, I really am getting max value from 5 to 7. And everything else becomes a question about, is the juice worth the squeeze for the amount of time, resource, energy, and effort it takes to manage the executions, manage the measurement? And then what does that mean for my customer relationships? Because the customer relationship is also a massive, massive important part in this. So it's not it will go away. It becomes a discussion point of, is the juice worth the squeeze in the execution and managing execution for, call it a long tail set of providers? And is there a different path to maintaining or building exceptional customer relationships that aren't predicated on investing in a media platform?
Yeah, and I got to imagine that for the ones where you're going to some degree, centrally direct or influence the investment against, that's great. But for the rest, and to your point, to maintain those customer relationships, there are going to have to be judicious decisions that probably your customer teams are going to have to make. Do you see it as kind of your role to give them guidance on, listen, I'm not going to try to coordinate and manage everything, but if you're going to do it, here are the guidelines that will help you invest as judiciously as possible?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I want to reemphasize my comment was more about what I think might happen in our industry. I do believe there is, like in many things, there's no one point that is the driver. So the path of the way through is ruthless collaboration, if you will, because internally, companies like mine, but internally, you have to have really, really strong foundational relationships and trust to be able to have just open dialogue about, if we did this or if we didn't do this, what might be the impact Is there a different path? What's going to have the best value benefit for our business and also for our customer? And all of those things become inputs into a discussion and a dialogue. And those decisions, I think, have to be made together with customer leaders who manage those relationships day in and day out. And part of the reason roles like mine exist is to provide tools, perspective, and also, I would say expertise support on if we are executing. Here's what great sort of looks like as you are thinking about how to execute and what to do.
Any marketer worth his salt will claim that the lifeblood of growth is innovation. So I want to know how you and your role of digital experiences, because innovation is about introducing something new, something that consumers may not necessarily be entirely familiar with. They may be tangentially. It's a product line extension, so they're building off of brand equity or something completely new. So how do you partner with the brands to deliver on successful innovation from a digital consumer engagement perspective?
And so innovation obviously comes to life in many different ways. So I'm not going to talk about product innovation from that lens in this context, but innovation comes to life in many different ways. What I do think is critical is back to where I started, which is thinking about a consumer experience. And in thinking of that consumer experience, it's not, I've got my national plan and my retail plan, or I've got my paid plan and then my website plan and then my social plan. And then it's actually finding a way to bring it together. So it's a consumer experience plan that is brought to life in the way that we as people would experience a brand and as we as people would want to have that experience of a brand. So I think in that context, innovation takes on many, many different forms, but one of them certainly would be ways of leveraging technology. I'm not going to say AI, Peter. I'm not going to say AI.
Let the record show it took us 30-something minutes into our conversation before the buzzword of our year, maybe even a couple of years, came up. So
I wanted to make it all the way through. But leveraging technology to deliver a better consumer experience and doing it cheaper and faster. And I do think there is a role for digital experiences, what you would historically think of as a consumer engagement platform or some form of digitally native experience that I think becomes highly critical in that consistency of a consumer experience with the brand. And it comes to life. It might come to life in an app. It might come to life on the site. It might come to life through retailer partnerships. It might come to life through various components of what an engagement program or loyalty program or things that might come to life in many different ways. But I think the notion of innovation broadly through digital experiences and partnerships, by the way, I do think partnerships that might not be something that you would think off your mind makes a lot of sense, like unexpected kind of partnerships. I think those are other forms of innovation that, as long as it's anchored in what is of value for our consumer, I think can make, again, massive impact.
So let's close this out, Luke. Looking forward, what's got your attention in terms of the customer journey, the digital experiences that will power those? Where are you leaning into? So my classic Wayne Gretzky question: where's the puck going, Luke?
I'll tell you what I would like to see. Again, back to our industry. I think the sooner we get to a place where we're not using the phrase retail media, the better it will be for our industry in totality. I think the industry is in a state of disruption, and that disruption might be evergreen for all I know, but it is very heavily being disrupted right now by the scale of what is today called retail media. by I would in some ways call it reemergence. Not that influencer marketing or creators didn't exist, but the extent to which they are front and center, in particular as Gen Z ages up, it's only going to increase. And brand discovery will increasingly happen through social platforms more so than it did in previous generations. And so you put all that together, and I would see us evolve and transcend beyond these distinctions and these buckets, because it'll raise all boats. Like it'll make marketing in totality. Like I remember Bob Leotes talking at some point from the A&A view about the overall performance of marketing across the industry and what that meant for the health of the companies. And so there is this element of raising all boats if marketing performs as it should. And that is something I would like to see as all these things are smushing together. But right now, it's just everybody sees dollar signs. So every company, agencies, consultancies, they'll either help you with your retail media business, or they'll help a brand strategize how to execute across retail media. And all of that, I think, needs to also transcend into just getting to better consumer solutions. And the faster we can do that, I think the better for the industry.
Well, to our audience, please go visit cpgguys.com. You can find all of our content. Episodes are organized by topics like retail media, insights, innovation, what have you. And if you think you or your company have some thought leadership to contribute to this ongoing conversation we have going at CPG Guys, drop us an email at contact@cpgguys.com, and maybe you can join us for a future episode of the podcast. And while you're at our site, or again at Spotify and Apple, please give us a rating to help feed the algorithm. And of course, we now are over 31,000 followers on LinkedIn. So incredibly honored that you all trust us to educate and entertain you in this little industry that we find ourselves. Luke Kigel, thanks for coming on the podcast and talking shop with us. Great to finally have you on.
It was great to be here. It's a long time coming. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Shree, we missed you. I know your old buddy Luke would have loved to talk to you, but you're too busy probably sipping rosé or champagne.
He's too fancy.
He's on the Riviera. You know, what can I tell you?
Yeah.
I know, too fancy. He's fancy pants Shree. Anyhow. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we look forward to speaking with you on the next episode of the CPG Guys podcast. Goodbye. The content in this podcast episode is provided for general informational purposes only. By listening to our episode, you understand that no information contained in this episode should be construed as advice from CPG Guys LLC or the individual author, hosts, or guests, nor is it intended to be a substitute for research on any subject matter. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by CPG Guys LLC. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. The views expressed by CPG Guys LLC do not represent the views of their employers or the entity they represent. CPG Guys LLC expressly disclaims any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages arising out of any individual's use of, reference to, or inability to use this podcast or the information we present in this podcast.